a lot of kids at 16-year-olds are, doing the exams and attending school where, I had the luxury lifestyle to the outside world that I was playing professional football, and, I didn't have to do my exams, but I'm sure we'll come to it in the podcast on how that didn't actually work in my favour.
So, Paddy, welcome to The Middle.
Thank you for having me.
As I was preparing for this episode, I was thinking about teenagers. And most teenagers, they're worrying about exams and friends and figuring out who they are. You were 16 and you were signing a professional football contract with Nottingham Forest. So I wanted to ask you to start, when you signed that at 16, did you feel like you had made it?
You know what? It's a question that I get asked quite a lot. And my response normally is, what does making it look like? Do you make it when you sign a professional contract, or do you make it when you make first team appearances? Do you make it when you play for your country? I didn't believe I made it. My goals were to be the best Premier League goalkeeper and play for my country. And, a lot of people do say, bit extreme that, but that was my ambition, to be the best. So I didn't feel like I made it, but I definitely felt like I was on the right path in order to. And you're right, yeah, a lot of kids at 16-year-olds are doing the exams and attending school where I had the luxury lifestyle to the outside world that I was playing professional football, and I didn't have to do my exams, but I'm sure we'll come to it in the podcast on how that didn't actually work in my favour. But at the age of 16, yes, it was very nice not to finish the last year and again be associated with a great club in England as Nottingham Forest.
What does it look like to be signed that young, but especially behind the scenes? Did anything change overnight for you?
Yeah, you're 16 years old. At some point, at the time, I probably did feel like at some point I've made it. I always say it's like the current of football. It might be the same in other sports, but you're kind of in this big sea and the current is just taking you in the right direction. And you just have faith that, when you're at a club like Forest or any well-established club in the UK especially, you just feel like it's going to take you in the right places. And very naive of me at 37-year-olds now. I can say that, but ultimately, there's a lot that goes off behind the scene. You sort of chucked in at the deep end. I definitely had imposter syndrome. That's for certain.
Yeah, I can see that. I can understand that, especially that young.
And again, when you're that young, you're only comparing yourself to people your age. And there's not many people at 16-year-old who get that opportunity or get asked to come out of school earlier to pursue a career in any sport. It might be happening a bit more now. Bear in mind this was 2005, so quite a few years ago. So yeah, it was known to happen, but not very, very often. So yeah, I felt special. I felt seen. I felt valued. I felt like I was, the club and people at the club identified that I had some potential, which does not only gives you an ego, but it definitely gives you some confidence as well.
Because you had started playing at a young age too, correct?
9 years old. So I started with Nottingham Forest Academy at 9 years old. That's when I officially joined their books.
And can you explain real quick, because I don't think maybe our American listeners understand that pipeline from the academy to the club. What is that?
So when I think 9 is the youngest you can join academy. So ultimately, what you do, you can go through the ranks of under 9s, under 10s, under 11s, and so on until you get to under 16s, and then you can then sign a scholarship. And normally it's a 3-year scholarship if I stand corrected. But I believe it's a 3-year scholarship you can sign, and then you can go into a professional contract. So scholarships can be from 17, 18, 19 years old, where I didn't do that. I went straight to a professional contract. So that's how it works over here. I believe it still works that way. I know they've changed a few bits and bobs, but that's ultimately the blueprint for the pathways.
Did it ever feel like a job? Did it ever start to feel like a job?
Yeah, and that's quite a defining moment
Oh.
in your career, because when you're young, you play with freedom. You play with a clear conscience. You're free to express yourself to a degree. When it becomes to feel like a job is when you know that your career depends on it. And it's just coming around 16, 17, I'd say, because you are, for me anyway, I was integrated with the first team. So you're kind of like coming out of having fun. And don't get me wrong, you can have fun whilst you're playing, but it kind of went from all being fun to actually now this is your career, this is your life. One bad move, one bad mistake, one bad word said, how does that jeopardize your career? So yeah, you do become a lot more conscious and aware of that the older you get in the world of football.
I don't know if you saw it. I know you and I, Chad, we both were watching the Winter Olympics a few weeks ago. They did this thing on Norway, and they were calling it the Norway because I'm going to probably get a little bit of this wrong. I'm paraphrasing, but they don't have professional kid leagues or anything like that until age 12 or 13. So kids are just allowed to try sports, to try whatever sport. There's no competition. And then once they hit that age 12 or 13, that's when you can start being more, start having more intense training, join clubs, join leagues, and actually start, if you want, making that more part of your life and your professional career. And I always thought it was just interesting watching it that is so different, especially how we in America do it. But that's such a different way to approach that fun and preserving that fun in a sport and in an activity as long as you can before that pressure and competition takes over.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I watched a video, a live stream a couple of days ago, and a couple of gentlemen will speak about the football club in Portugal called Benfica, and they sort of do a thing where they just say to the young players, if you want to turn up to training, you can. And I think it's really good that they do that. And my reasons being is because it gives the person, the player, gives them the power. It gives them the ownership then. And if they want to turn up, they do it at their own backs, off their own backs. And, it's going towards the same goal, but it's a completely different angle that they're coming at. And I feel that's a really good approach, because the young players who genuinely want to turn up and train will, and the ones that don't obviously won't. So, and I think that's a really good way of looking at it, because especially in the UK, and that's all I can basically monitor because it's obviously where I'm from, and I was brought up in the world of football in the UK, is that I think a lot of players, young players, is it the parents' dreams or is it their dream? And that's something that really is being highlighted at the minute across here, because again, it's probably spiked since social media has been a thing, because people want to portray, oh look, my son or daughter are playing for X, Y, and Z, and how many times have these parents sat down with their children and actually asked them, do you want to play? Do you actually want to play football? Do you want to play this sport? And just while we're on the topic, Megan, as well, like for me, I know I should have probably stepped away from football maybe a year, maybe 2 years before I actually did. But what stopped me was actually me telling my parents, because I'd seen the sacrifices that they made, and bearing in mind that my parents didn't drive, so it was always 2 buses to training over an hour and a half each way. So 3 hours in total, traveling 4 times a week, and you do take on that acknowledgement of what your parents do sacrifice, and to give you the best opportunities. So I knew they would have been upset, and there was, but it's just another way of looking at it, isn't it? Where give the young player the power, let them choose, let them express themselves at their own free will, and you'll probably see better results if that's the case.
how do you balance that, let them choose and give them that onus? And, I think everyone has a day or two where they're just, I'm not up to it today. I don't want to perform today. So pushing through maybe a little bit of that normal, just, I'm not ready for it.
No, it's a valid question. And it's sort of what I sort of do, Megan. So I coach athletes, predominantly footballers. They could say that, they could say, look, really don't feel up to it. And now just asking a simple question. Well, how would you feel if you didn't turn up today? And how would you feel if you did turn up? What would you benefit if you didn't turn up today? And what would you benefit if you did? So again, you're leading the person to their right answers. And again, I can sit there and say, well, obviously, if you go to training, you're going to benefit, but that might not be their right answer. They might realize in that moment that actually, you know what, my heart's not in it. My heart's not just not in the sport no more. So it's really important that although we know the right answers for ourselves, doesn't necessarily mean it's the same answer for any other individual.
When you were playing, what did pressure feel like? Did it grow the longer you were with the club?
Yeah, you sort of inherit resilience along the way. It's not something you gain overnight. You know the pressure's there. I think the pressure lies more internally than it does externally. And what I mean by that is, you can stick me in front of 20, 30,000 people and I know that I'm there to do my job.
Yeah.
It's when you step off the pitch and it's being in and around the coaches and making sure that you are doing everything that they want you to see and that you're progressing. I think that's where the pressure lies. And it will personally did for me because your coach's opinions matters.
Yeah.
And ultimately they're the ones who are going to give you a contract or not. The fans are going to be there inevitably. Like, it doesn't matter whether it's home or away. And don't get me wrong, there's different elements to being at home or playing away games and stuff like that. But, for me, it lies within the four walls of the changing room and the training ground. That's where the pressure's lied for me personally.
Were you allowed to struggle with that pressure? Were you allowed to show that? Or did you feel like you kind of had to be grateful all the time, happy all the time?
Yeah, I did struggle. I massively struggled. I'm not going to lie about it. I really did. Did anyone know I struggled? No. No. Because why would I show vulnerability to someone who's going to give me a contract? It just doesn't happen. And again, this is more the reason why I've set my business up with Person Before Player. It gives them players that safe space where they can be vulnerable. I really struggled. I disregarded any concerns or worries. I just assumed it was part of the roller coaster I was riding. And again, being 37 years old and now looking back at my short career, it is like looking at a roller coaster and you can't believe the ups and downs, the spins, everything. You can't believe it, but it's okay when you step away from it and you look at it from a different perspective. But when you're on the roller coaster, you don't really know if you're going up or down. You really don't. So yeah, it's a tough one. It really is a tough one because a lot of players are suppressing feelings. They really are. They will have doubts and concerns, but they've got no one really they can go to. And people do say, well, they can go to the parents, but I wouldn't have gone to my parents because I want them to know that I'm okay. I want them to see that actually I've got everything together here, because you want to come across like you're the polished package.
Yeah.
And again, that's what your ego does. Your ego doesn't want to show vulnerability to everyone, and especially being 16 years old when all your schoolmates think, oh, it's Paddy, he's played for Forest now and he plays for England schoolboys, and you don't want to go, oh, actually, you know what, I don't really enjoy it, or I'm really struggling with this. Them conversations just don't happen. So yeah, it happens more often than not, and I certainly did struggle.
And I think you said being 16, but also I think this happens in a lot of sports. Your identity becomes footballer or player or whatever you're doing. It so quickly becomes that. It probably was a little before when you're more in clubs and training and trying to get that professional contract. Did you have a moment where you kind of realized people looked at you as a footballer and not as Paddy?
Yeah, and again, it didn't really happen until I stepped away from the game.
Oh.
Um, because then you enter the normal world, if that's how we want to call it. But when I was playing, the first thing people would say is, "Hey Paddy, how's football going?" It was never, "Hey Paddy, how are you? How's the family?"
Yeah.
And again, they've got the best interest, obviously, by asking you how you are, but it does mold you into a certain way, and you sort of inherit an identity that you don't really know until you step away. And that's something that I really figured out when I stepped away from the game. I realized that I wasn't that person. It was just the way football had created me, maybe to survive, maybe to get through it, maybe to perform. I don't know. But I mean, I can remember getting my first pay slip and going out to a shop and getting all these fancy clothes. Why? Because that's how a footballer must look, and that's how footballers did look. So, but that's not me. I'm far from that. But again, I understand why players do that, because it's about fitting in and being a part of something. And it's really hard really hard to stand out. There's certainly players who are coming through the academy system, maybe from 9 years old, who are institutionalized and believe that this is the way they must act and the way they must appear.
When did it, because you talked about when you stepped away, when did it become clear to you that football was either not going to be what you imagined, or was, like you said, your heart was just no longer in it?
Yeah, it probably comes back to the question you asked me earlier on, where I knew I wasn't enjoying it, and maybe I should have stepped away 2 years before. But yeah, I remember playing games, and I used to look over at the clock and hoping that the 90 minutes was up, and that's when it really hit me that this isn't for me no more. Because I lost my ambition, I lost my drive. It kind of felt like I was deflated, and it really shone in my performances as well. And it's not, although it's a job, it's not a job that you can just turn up and just get through.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't personally. I was not just representing me, but also my family. And if I've had a bad game or mistakes were happening, I'm representing my family as well, and I wouldn't want to put them through that. So I had to. First, I did it for me. I did it for me. I walked away from the game at 21 years old, and it was the best thing that I did. It really was, and it was a very brave thing I did, because a lot of people to this day are probably still in the game out of fear. Where I took that brave step and was like, I need to take ownership of my life here, and I did.
Did you grieve it? Did you miss it?
There's elements where I do miss, but honestly, Megan, I was excited. I was excited because it felt like the shackles are off, and I could genuinely go and do anything. Again, probably a bit naive of me, because, as we mentioned, I left school a year earlier, so I had no education behind me. I had no really sort of life skills that I was aware of until I sat down and looked in the mirror and says, right, what transferable skills have we got? But I had good people around me. I had my brother, who again is like a rock. He's the rock in my life. Everything I need, I go to him, and he's just been the perfect role model for me. And that's the sort of person I want to be for other people, because a lot of people don't have good people around them sometimes. But yeah, it was tough. It was tough, and especially where you haven't got an identity as well. It's just about having all the pieces, the puzzles, and just trying to figure it out and building it very slowly. And I got there in the end, but it was very challenging coming away from the game.
I was going to ask, you said earlier, especially after you left, people would ask you, how's football, or anything about it. How did you respond to that, especially once you were out?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I smile, because people do still ask me, but in a roundabout way. So they say, "Oh, hey up, Paddy. Why didn't you make it as a footballer? Why did you stop playing?"
Oh, no.
Which is fine. It's I get it. I get it. If you're not seeing someone a few years, they'll always say, why did you stop playing? And it's even rubbed off to my family now. So my parents will get asked, "Oh, how's Paddy? Why did he stop playing?" And there's a bit of that it does hurt a bit, because you feel like I feel like I had to prove myself to people. And I didn't want to come across looking like a failure. But I'm suppose that I'm grateful that I made the choice, rather than it being taken away from me through an injury, which happens so often. And that would have been, I can't imagine how it must be for players who have their career taken away from them, who generally do want to play and do have potential, more importantly. So yeah, it hurts sometimes. It does, but ultimately, I always say scars can lead to purpose, and everything that I went through in my career, all the bad times, all the good times, I can pass that on to the younger generation and, prevent these sort of things happening. And that's my sort of mission with Person Before Player.
When you started that transition from being a footballer to really the next, I want to say the next chapter, but you were 21. You have multiple chapters ahead of you. What did you do right in that transition, and what did you do wrong?
I'll start off with wrong, because it's always easy to be negative about yourself, isn't it? What I should have done in hindsight was, whilst I was still playing and had some form of credibility still and still well known into the world of sports, was use my name, my brand, to my own benefit, and built something, or gone into a different role, or had a contingency in place where actually I'm going to stop playing by the end of the season. This is how it's going to look. This is my plan. This is what I'm curious about. This is what I really like. But it all starts with having them conversations. So if I'd have sat down with someone and they asked those questions to me whilst I was still playing, that contingency and transition out would have been so much easier, but it was more of a reactive process for me. And again, this is an ongoing issue, Megan, still, especially in England football, where it's such a reactive system, where we're not having conversations weekly, daily, and just, really making the individual think about the contingency plan, because it's inevitable. It is going to happen at some point in their lives. Hopefully it doesn't for a lot of them. Hopefully they all make it to the Premier League and they don't ever need a second job. The percentages are quite high. I think it's 90% upwards in terms of they will need a second job once they retire. So what does that look like? And again, a lot of players assume they're going to go into coaching because it sort of goes in hand, but I think that's just a comfort. I think that's within their comfort zone. It's the surroundings and the culture that they're aware of. So it is a sort of slide from playing into coaching. But I think if you really ask questions and make them be curious about what's life like outside of football, it doesn't have to be. They can come out of that tunnel vision. They can broaden their horizons and really, strive to be wherever they want to be. Because football does give you a mindset and gives you fantastic transferable skills.
Yeah. What did you do right?
Oh yeah, the right bit. What do I do right? I think I really took my time and really thought about what it is that I want to do, and try to not rush into something, and have a pathway and create my own pathway. Again, I had plenty of conversations with my brother, had a lot of reassurance. But yeah, it was tough. Like, bear in mind, and I don't mind saying it, once I came out of football, I fell into depression because I lost my, I say I lost my identity. I never really truly had an identity. As previously mentioned, we sort of inherit one whilst you're at football, and then when that routine and that culture's no longer there, you just feel lost as a person, no lack of purpose. So it's really about, starting from the ground up and building on that. So step by steps, little tiny steps, and you eventually, you can see a sort of purpose on the horizon, and you can build it however you want to. And that's the beauty of it. And that's where that exciting element comes into it, because I could have done anything and gone anywhere.
And I think most folks at age 21 are still trying to figure out who they are, what they want to do. They're not going to be the same person at 40 than they were at 21. That's just natural. You had already had a completely different identity by the time you hit 21. You had been a professional football player. You had also been Paddy, just going through being a normal teenager, late teen, early adult. So I imagine that had to be, you were starting from a very different point than a lot of your peers and a lot of folks around you.
Yeah, I always say, although I didn't leave with an education, what I did leave was with a mindset. And that is, for me, that has drove me even to this day. Don't get me wrong, I've still not got any English or maths qualifications, but what I've got is life skills and that mindset that I've developed from such a young age of being in a high performance sport and surrounding myself with high performing athletes. These are things that you steal it from them, and when you can accustom yourself with that sort of mindset and continue that throughout your career, it's a solid foundation to build on. I can always go and get my education and qualifications if I needed. People can't get that sort of experience what I got. So, and this is why I encourage every young person to get in sport. And it doesn't matter what sport it is. It's about, it's about challenging yourself physically, but also learning mentally and having these skills that you don't really know you have until you really sit down and go, wow, I've actually inherited quite a lot of transferable skills here. How can I now transfer that into a different line of work? So yeah, I felt very grateful that I got given that opportunity to where, yeah, I came away with a good mindset.
First off, who needs math, Patty? We don't need math. We have calculators on our phones. We don't need math.
Yeah, exactly that.
Oh. But I think you're so right, and I don't really want to get like into AI, but there are so many people out there. You don't have to be an athlete or anything like that to be looking at yourself in the mirror and going, as technology changes, as the world changes, what skills do I need? And so I think for some people that's really hard, or they to your point, when a lot of athletes kind of naturally look at coaching because they feel it's very similar, is that ability to open their aperture and say, what else can I really do that isn't just adjacent? That's a hard exercise to go through. It's a worthwhile one, but I think a lot of people struggle with saying, how can I take what I used to do and apply it somewhere else? And to your point, what you gain from it are those more life skills, those street smarts, as we say here. Because everything else can be trained. I mean, you can get trained in math if you really want. But the stuff that is going to get you through from cradle to grave are those more life skills.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I think one of the vital skills that any human can have is being adaptable.
Yes.
It's, life doesn't go the way we planned. I'm sure we're not doing the thing that we assumed we was going to be doing when we was 16. I'm certainly not. So, it's about heading in the right direction, but sometimes it might take a different course. But the thing is, we have to keep moving in the same direction. As long as it's going forward, as long as we look at the glass is always half full, and we try and learn. And more importantly, don't. And it gets said a lot, but I will say it because I think it's important. But we should never be afraid to fail or make mistakes. I genuinely thrive off making mistakes because only good things will come from it. I know I'll learn from it. I'll know where I went wrong, and you can work it backwards and see where it started. And then what happens when you start making mistakes? Then you're comfortable. Your comfort zone expands. I've been put in some really, tough situations in my sporting career and my career after in certain roles. And, when you're exposed to stuff like that, when you know that you can handle them situations, that comfort zone just keeps expanding. So the more life changes and alters and, it throws curveballs at you know that you've got the skills and mindset to push through it.
How do you remember how long it took you to kind of feel your purpose either coming back, or you said kind of seeing that new purpose on the horizon? Do you remember how long that took?
Yeah. It was probably a couple of years ago.
Oh,
Yeah. So the thing is, and I do a few workshops on purpose. As I've mentioned, sometimes it's about just moving in the right direction, and sometimes things will just manifest in front of you, and then you'll go, "That's what I want to do." And that's how Person Before Player started. I was in my coaching qualifications, so my life skills coaching and corporate coaching. I just happened to watch a podcast, which was ex-athletes speaking about their careers, and I soon identified that, wow, my experience as a young professional footballer wasn't unique, and this is an ongoing problem, and it still is a problem. And I thought, well, coaching in the world of football would be really beneficial. I know the sports psychologists, and but I've never known anyone to coach any professional footballers or any athletes. So that's and then I realized I found my purpose. I found my purpose, and I've really gone all out with it. I've started the business a couple of years ago, and it's slowly progressing, but it's moving in the right direction. And again, it's about having patience and having faith in what we do, and how we pursue it.
What are clubs still getting wrong about mental health?
They've definitely are heading in the right direction with it. I think the world in general is. I think a lot of people have identified now mental health. It's a strong word to say what they're getting wrong. I think it's about them being more aware of the player's journey and what the player needs, especially. But not just the player though. It's the person behind the shirt, the person that goes home at night. I mean, ultimately, to get the best performance out of your player, the person needs just as much development also. And it's also giving them that stability. So in the UK, and I believe they've rolled this out in the US now as well, that you've got a player care system, which is in place, very much needed. Certainly has its benefits to clubs and the players and the families. But however, it just doesn't tick all the boxes. It doesn't really give players that stability. So person before player doesn't replace player care, but what it does, it complements it and it supports it, but just from a different angle and perspective. So what I do, I coach players and mentor them, and being external away from the club gives the player that stability. So you can have a player care officer at a club, but the moment that player moves on to a different club, it's a new face. It's a new face to be vulnerable with. It's a new relationship they're gonna have to build. So when they've got someone externally who can work with them throughout their career, it gives them stability. They haven't got to suppress certain things. They can be completely vulnerable with me. It's all confidential. And I coach them and lead them to their right answer. So again, it just complements the clubs and player care. And that's where I generally believe, not where the sport's failing. They just need to identify it very quickly, because it will make tremendous difference to not just performance wise, but just the mental health side of it. We've seen statistics from players who retire from football, and they have addictions, gambling, divorce rate is high. I think it's 45% of professional footballers get divorced once they retire. So it's about building a well-rounded person, not just for the sport, but for life after the sport as well.
Would anything surprise fans about what players are thinking as they're either playing or starting to accept that transition out?
I think fans would be extremely surprised with a lot of things. Football, and like most sports, it's very romantic to the outsider. It's very glamorized. It's everybody wants to be an athlete, a footballer, American footballer. But when you are inside them walls and within that culture, you see for what it really is sometimes. And there is beauty in the game. I'm not taking anything away from the sport, because it's, in my opinion, the greatest sport in the world. It's not perfect, and that's what we aim to achieve. It never will be perfect, because things always need to change, but we have to create a movement that pushes us in that right direction. And it needs to evolve, is probably a better word of using. We need to evolve the sport. But yes, there's plenty of stuff that will probably shock fans. I know players who in the Premier League who are genuinely afraid to leave the house. Again, it's these young players wanting to do a career in football, watch their favourite players growing up, but don't really understand that they're going to again inherit a certain lifestyle that they've just not been equipped to deal with. Fame is it's not easy to manage. And I don't get me wrong, I wasn't famous at all, but within a small 10-mile radius in Nottingham, people know me at that time, and I can't imagine what it must be like globally. So it's something, again, it needs looking, and we just need to keep pushing it forward, that clubs identify this issue and certain support gets put in place where, it takes pressure off these people.
Is either what you're doing or this player care sort of a mentorship, helping people kind of understand, like, especially when players do kind of get put into this position of, here are ways to navigate it. Here are ways that we've learned to adjust, or maybe more adjust in a more healthy way.
Yeah, I think it helps with me personally. I think it helps the fact that I can relate to a lot of stuff,
You lived
if not all of it, and that reassures them. And I genuinely say this to everyone: if I can do it, you can do it. It's they've all got the same mindset. What I've got, that goes without saying. It's about finding that way to unlock your potential. It's just finding it, and sometimes you just need prodding and poking. Sometimes we've all done it. We all say we're going to go to the gym at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, and we just lie in bed and go, you know what, might just have that extra half an hour in bed. Well, I'm that person that's going to prod and poke you, and especially in the world of football, it's that really goes a long way. And that's, again, Megan, that's something that I genuinely needed, because at the beginning of this podcast, I told you that I've really struggled, and I didn't speak to no one. So just having someone to hear me speak, and any bit of guidance or mentoring shit would have been, potentially would have changed my career. It really would have.
You're doing it now. You're helping others feel seen and helping them understand that what they're feeling is probably quite normal.
Yeah, and that's it. And I think normal is probably a great way of putting it, because you don't know, when you've been in a industry like that and a culture like that, you don't know what's normal and what isn't, especially from such a young age. You throw a question yourself, like, is this normal? Should I be feeling like this? And again, I think so many young people in general, not just in sports, they lack so much emotional understanding, emotional intelligence, probably a better way of
Yeah.
putting it. They're not intelligent in that respect, and they lack self-awareness. The more they can develop that and have conversations, and especially from a young age, it don't just help them, but it sets good habits and standards for that. When they get to a certain age, they will pass it on to the next generation. And what we find out with that, it will just create such a healthier culture where men in this topic, men will be open to speak openly and freely. Because again, there's a lot of people saying that men don't open up. They probably don't. But if we can sort of incorporate it into the world of football at a young age, the foundation's there.
And I would think in any professional sports, maybe you felt it too, there is a psychological impact of being chosen, of being picked, and being, allowed to have that dream come to life because someone else validated you by picking you for the team. And when you're young, I think that chosen feeling is very formative in both good and maybe less good ways.
My daughter asked me the other day, what's your favourite number? And I said, it's number 1. She went, why is it number 1? And I says, well, my birthday's on the 1st. I says, goalkeepers wear the number 1 shirt. And I'm obsessed about winning, like genuinely obsessed with it. And I'm quite competitive still. And she said to me, well, what happens if you come second? I said, well, I'm first place to last then, aren't I?
This is not the right analogy at all, but it reminds me of that joke/phrase that if you're being chased by the bear, you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just got to be faster than anyone else running with you.
Yeah, exactly that. Or trip someone.
Or that too. That's your competitiveness again.
Yeah, that's it.
When you help players now, you talk a lot about contingency plans and that you didn't really have one, but you're trying to help change that a lot, especially within clubs. Why is having a contingency plan so important? Because I think a lot of people, or keep me honest, feel that, if I have a contingency plan, it's a lack of belief in myself that I can't do this.
One word, inevitable. At some point, your playing career or sporting career will come to an end. And it might come sooner than what you think. Unfortunately, for some, it definitely does. Having a contingency plan in place gives you that reassurance. And it doesn't only just give you a bit of reassurance that you're going to be okay and you've got a plan, but it also reflects really highly on how mature you are as a person and how confident you are in the sport that you're participating in, that you can look at the contingency and still go and perform to the highest standards in the sport. I understand why athletes don't do it, because they've got that tunnel vision. The only thing matters is the season or my career for the time being or the sport I'm in, and everything else is completely disregarded. I just don't want people to do the same thing what I did and react rather than being proactive. And then when you are reacting to the transition, you can make very rash decisions. You can fall into jobs that might not be where you want to be, and then you end up being trapped for a salary, and because people have bills,
Mm-hmm.
and then it becomes a dead end job.
Yep.
So, it's one of the ones that fail to prepare and prepare to fail. It's as simple as that. But it's something to be afraid of, and that's what I really want to ensure people, and especially people listening to this podcast, is that there's genuinely nothing to be afraid of. You have the skills for whatever you've done in your previous jobs, in your previous sports. You have the skills. You've just got a plan, and it can be a long-term plan. It can be a short-term plan. Identify what your transferable skills are. Be curious. Try and fail at stuff. I certainly did. But sometimes it's process by elimination as well. So you try certain things that you go, you know what, that's actually not my bag. That's not where I want to pursue my career. But then you tick and something off, and you know where your direction's going. And that's why I said to you, Megan, that I knew my purpose a couple of years ago, because I ticked so many things off along the way, but I was always heading in the right direction. And I finally got to the horizon and go, there's my purpose. So you just got to keep moving forward in that perspective.
If 16-year-old Paddy could see you right now, what do you think would surprise him the most?
What would surprise 16-year-old me? One, that I've got a beard. That definitely would. I think what would really surprise me is that I could survive without football. I can survive and be okay. That great things can happen and steer me off course, but I'm always in control of the steering wheel and I can always pull it back. I think, that's a really scary thought at 16 years old, to be thinking, I put my eggs in one basket, and if this doesn't work, then what? So yeah, I think 16-year-old Paddy would be very proud of 37-year-old Paddy.
Well, I think a lot of people are proud of 37-year-old Paddy.
Thank you.
This has been lovely. I always end, though, maybe with the most, not controversial, but, maybe an unexpected question. So when you were a player, or even now, what is the most ridiculous superstition you had?
I always used to put my left boot on before my right.
Oh.
I don't know why I did it, but even to this day, I still put my left trainer on before my right. So I don't know if it's just a force of habit, but I made sure when I put my boots on, my left boot was always on before my right, and I'll do it extra tight because I was right-footed. So your left foot.
I was there. Are you right-handed, right-footed?
Right, yeah, that's correct. So I felt like if my left boot was extra tight when I'm planting my foot on the ground, it would just give me that little bit of stability. And it was a superstition, because I felt like I've got to have a good game, so my left boot's always going on. But even when I had a bad game, the left boot still went on, so it didn't really make a difference.
When we started this conversation, we were talking about what it feels like to make it, and that feeling of kind of being chosen. What I'm taking away is that success, even that early, can certainly build you, but it can also box you in. and maybe in ways that you don't even expect.
Again, anyone listening who's an athlete, who's in the world of sport, is just be curious. Be curious and figure out what you're good at and what you're bad at. You'll be surprised. And don't box yourself in, Megan. I think that's a really good way of putting it.
Well, Paddy, thank you for coming on. Thank you for your honesty. These are conversations that I'm sure a lot of athletes are having privately, but as you said, very few have publicly. So thank you for your willingness to go there and talk about your experiences and coming on and sharing with us.
No, I really appreciate it, Megan. And again, as I mentioned, I started this journey just through watching a podcast. So I think it's fantastic that you are getting people on from all different walks of life to share their story, because it will be hitting people and resonating with them. So, no, keep up the great work, and thank you again for having me on.
Thanks for spending time with us in the middle. If today's story caught your attention, drop a subscribe, share the episode, follow us on social media, and remember, it ain't over till it's over.